I'm Rob Kingsbury. I'm here today with Ian Lowes, founder of CompareStructuredProducts.com and the Managing Director of Independent Financial Advisors, Lowes Financial Management. We're here talking about structured products, and this session, Ian, we're going to talk about the risks associated with structured products. Now, perhaps one of the most talked about risks, certainly post-Lehman's and the collapse of Lehman's back in 2008, is counterparty or credit risk. What exactly is counterparty risk?
Simply, counterparty risk is the risk that if the bank behind the contract, behind the structured product, goes bust, you potentially lose all of your capital. It's ironic that this is now heavily discussed after the collapse of Lehman Brothers. This was a risk that always existed. When Lehman Brothers went down, they were the counterparty to a number of structured products that were issued in late 2007 and 2008. And ultimately, when they went bust, people who had invested in those contracts lost their capital. Now, some people were able to recover their capital through the Financial Services Compensation Scheme because the literature on these structured products was deemed to be a little bit misleading in terms of the risk that they were accepting there. That's all been resolved now. The Financial Services Authority have introduced some strict measures to ensure that the providers properly explain this risk. Now, you have a huge range of potential counterparties, from weaker institutions to much stronger institutions. It doesn't matter which financial institution it is. If it can't meet its liabilities, then you are potentially going to lose your capital. And there isn't a single bank that could effectively survive a complete run on its assets without external support, and we saw that in 2008. So one of the keys to mitigating or managing that counterparty risk is to diversify your portfolio to cover a number of different counterparties. Some people have argued it's actually better to put all of your money into one big bank like Barclays or HSBC, because if that goes bust, it could be all over and time to think about investing in some chickens and some sheep and a shotgun. But ultimately, if you diversify your portfolio as you would do with any other investments, then you are potentially reducing that counterparty risk, assuming we don't get the catastrophic collapse of one bank after another, but we are talking an Armageddon scenario. So the more counterparty risk that you accept, i.e. potentially the weaker that bank, the greater the potential return that you're going to get for accepting that risk. So if you wanted to stick to one of the stronger, perhaps less well-known banks like Rabobank, the funding rate within Rabobank is going to dictate that the return that would be payable on that contract might be less than a similar contract issued by the Japanese bank Nomura, for example. And you can use counterparty risk there to your advantage by accepting a little bit more credit risk in order to get a little bit more exposure to the market or the underlying index. So, as I say, ironic that this is discussed. It's something that's always been there. It'll probably stop being discussed just before the next bank goes bust in 20, 30 years' time. But managing your portfolio is essential.
Okay, so it's basically a good idea is to actually spread my risk between various counterparties.
We all know you just shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. So spreading your risk across a number of counterparties. In the deposit space, people do this already up to £85,000, the Financial Services Compensation Scheme limit. Same thing holds in terms of structured deposits. But once you're beyond that, you wouldn't put all your money into a single share. You wouldn't put all your money into a single corporate bond. So spreading the risk does make some sense. Now, you can theoretically assess the degree of risk by using credit rating agencies such as Standard & Poor's, Fitch and Moody's. These were criticized in 2008 for getting it wrong. They certainly had Lehman's rated as being strong and capable of meeting their obligations, and clearly they weren't. But again, if all of the banks turn on a particular institution, or that particular institution get things horribly wrong, then the credit rating agencies are not going to be able to see that until after the event. So they become a guide. Now, you could do your own due diligence, but I have to question whether your due diligence against the potential solvency of a major bank is going to be any better than Fitch, Moody's and Standard & Poor's put together. So you can use them as a guide. You have to recognize, however, that you're accepting that risk in the same way that you might be accepting market risk, you might be accepting inflation risk. But again, think about these risks in the context of what you might have invested in as an alternative, because, as I say, a huge bank going bust, it means that it's going to have a devastating effect on your market, wherever that is.
Where can I find the information about the banks? How do I know what's a weaker bank and what's a stronger bank?
Compare Structured Products identifies the credit rating agencies' ratings for each individual bank. So you might go on there, look at a contract that might be backed by Barclays Bank, for example. It will show you what the Standard & Poor's rating is, what the Fitch rating is, and what the Moody's rating is. And these are all very similar between the agencies. And the stronger the rating, in theory, the less likely the bank is to go bust. The weaker the rating, the more likely, in theory, the bank is to go bust. But we are talking about a bank going bust. This is a serious event, and most of the banks that are behind structured products in the UK are very strong institutions, which all of the credit rating agencies rate as either strong or very strong and assess them as being capable of meeting their obligations.
Ian, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure.